Welcome back, everyone. The following episode will conclude the story of Art Blajos, also known as Conejo from Primera Flats. He was once an elite Mexican Mafia member who would ultimately pull away from that life with a little help from a friend. But first, a quick word from our sponsor, coming to you from the book of Psalms 139, verses 1 and 2. O Lord, you have examined my heart and know everything about me. You know when I sit down or stand up. You know my thoughts even when I'm far away. Let me paraphrase the entire chapter of Psalms 139 for you in one quick sentence. You can run, but you can't hide from God. So what does this have to do with Mr. Conejo from La Primera? Follow me. Because of their ongoing engagement in violent prison activities, Mexican Mafia members spend most of their prison time in lockup units. With hours of boring time in our celdas, we read books. From Louis L'Amour's Shit Kickers, Western paperbacks, to the Bible. One of the favorite pastimes was sharpening up on Mexican and Aztec and ancient cultural history. Anything that fed into the warrior mentality was on the table. From the fascination with this literature, many M. Carnales adopted a favorite handle, which also served as a code name. Conejo adopted Tochin, which literally means rabbit in Nahuatl. They all did their homework, and I'm sure everyone who adopted a new handle, derived from ancient Mexican Indian tribes, was intimately familiar with the meaning, origin, and significance attached to each name. On December 9, 1975, the fatal stabbing of Cornelio Carrasco, aka Corny from Visalia, took place at San Quentin's North Block. Inmate eyewitnesses identified Conejo and William Willie Boy Bermudez from Colton as the assailants. This internal Mexican Mafia execution was a direct result of Corny's recruitment at the Tehachapi facility by Carlos Pieface Ortega, who became an informant a few months later after locking up at Folsom in early 1973. Corny and other recruits brought in by Pieface were not accepted as members, and Corny was told to remove his M tattoo. When he refused, Corny paid the ultimate price and forfeited his life. Willie Boy was convicted of this homicide. The photograph you are viewing shows Willie Boy smiling in his out-to-court attire, with the waistband and cuffs encircling his waist. Looking totally relaxed and smiling in his courtroom seat, one would think he had just blown out the candles on his birthday cake. On November 24, 1978, M. associate Nicholas Nick Villa was shot to death inside his home in Northridge, California. According to family members, they were led at gunpoint to a separate room by Conejo and fellow M members Mike Boo Boo Moreno and Richard Baby Boy Resendez, where they were tied up, gagged, and admonished to remain silent. Consistent with their unwritten rule of not taking out families, Nick was tied up in his bedroom, pistol whipped, and shot 3 times in the head. Conejo was charged with the Villa homicide, was later convicted and sentenced. As you can see from these photographs, the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department made it a practice between the 1960s through 1980s to stamp a purple star on the booking slip of anyone charged with a 187 PC, a murder charge. This was done to make deputies aware of the more violent inmates in their custody. To the accused prisoners, It was like a badge of honor, denoting the special status and the elite company we were a part of. Conejo and some of the Mexican Mafia members booked at one time or another at LACJ for murder are shown in this slide with the identifying star. Beginning from left to right is me in 1969, Charlie Brown Rabaca from Wilmas in 1976, Kiko Torres from Eloyo Maravilla in 1978, Conejo Blajos in 1979, and Artie Guzman from King Cobras in 1980. While Conejo was awaiting trial at LACJ on one murder, he became a suspect in another Mexican Mafia internal hit. After disrespecting a fellow member's wife, Gilbert Chaparro Ruiz from Fort Maravilla was strangled, stabbed, and beat to death in the LA County Jail by multiple M assailants. According to inmate eyewitnesses who were there, Mexican Mafia members Daniel Cuate Grajeda, Mike Bubu Moreno, and Aryan Brotherhood member John Youngster Stinson were in the gang module unit squatting on the freeway, which is the pathway outside the jail cell, and inside one of the cells. Youngster was Cuate Grajeda's street crime partner, and AB and M were always considered compatible for classification and housing purposes. On this fateful day, the men were all engaged in a sociable conversation outside their LACJ cells. Chaparro and Youngster were facing from the inside cell out to the freeway, as Conejo quietly walked up behind them from the back of the cell with a towel held in both hands. Youngster looked up and his eyes widened, possibly thinking he was the intended target. Conejo gave him a warning look to assure him he was good and proceeded to place a towel around Chaparro's neck. The jail deputies had to conduct the jail count twice because they came up one body short the first time. On the second round, they got it right when they observed and discovered the dead body of Chaparro Ruiz on the freeway, with blood draining from his throat, running into the water vent on the floor. Chaparro had surrendered his life for this violation. On another occasion, and possibly fancying himself to be proficient with a jail towel, Conejo's strangulation techniques were once again put into practice during another internal Mexican Mafia hit inside a penal facility. In the ideal position to take out another target, this time it was Agustin Gus Rivera from San Diego. Catching Gus by surprise, Conejo twisted and turned the grip around his neck with the state-issued towel until Gus went out. After wringing his neck for several minutes, Conejo retired to his cell, pretending to be oblivious to what had just occurred. To everyone's shock, Gus regained consciousness and realized he was still alive. Conejo was beside himself with frustration at having failed, but such was the way of life in the mob. Years later, while housed in protective custody, Sailor Boy and I teased Gus about engaging in a necktie party game and coming back from the dead. Gus never found such humor to his liking. Here's an incident involving Conejo that occurred after I was released from incarceration in 1983. While the U.S. Marshals WITSEC Division went through their red tape of getting me approved for the Federal Witness Protection Program, I was hidden in a motel room in Hacienda Heights. Because of my knowledge of the Fresno Mexican Mafia hit on Gilbert Roybal, I was a principal witness against Robot Salas, Tati Torres, Choco Montellano, and Alfie Sosa, and the Fresno DA's office assigned Investigator Darrell Kennedy as my personal armed bodyguard. Officer Kennedy had an adjoining room to mine on the first floor. On the third day of my stay, I observed a car driving up across from my room. When the male driver exited the vehicle, I immediately noticed the salt and pepper hair that made me look closer. As a younger guy, Conejo Blajos had what I believed to be poliosis, a harmless birthmark patch of white hair, mixed or interwoven with his regular hair. Conejo had coincidentally checked into the same motel where I was being stashed with his lady, who was known as Green Eyes. So what are the odds, you ask? In Southern California, the so-called danger zone for being recognized by the gang world is virtually everywhere. I immediately notified Agent Kennedy of Conejo's presence. He pulled out his service weapon, got on the police radio, and notified the task force guys of this development. Within minutes, as we observed Conejo and Green Eyes ascending the stairs to their second-floor room, the task force guys had arrived. They took over the front office and advanced to the second floor. Daryl and I watched as they entered Conejo's room and took him and Green Eyes into custody. All I learned is that they found a handgun, dope, and money in their possession. I was moved again, and the U.S. Marshals accelerated their red tape to get me on a plane headed east. Although I seriously doubt Conejo was a believer when this arrest took place, God doesn't make mistakes. Even this event in his life happened for an eternal purpose. In the prison world of evil men, I would have classified Conejo as a one-percenter. With no disrespect to my Harley-driving friends in the OMG business who utilize this term loosely, Conejo was indeed among that upper echelon of deadly men in the world of crime. If I'm coming across to anyone like I'm glorifying that life, who Conejo was, or what he did as a bad guy, keep watching. The best part of telling the Conejo story is the contrast between who he was then and how his life was transformed in the twinkling of an eye into who he is today. You must remember there are parts of his criminal past he cannot talk about, but I can. It's not like I would ever raise my right hand against him anyway. He belongs to a higher authority, the real Godfather. The Mexican Mafia surrendered several well-known men from their world of darkness. They were all considered to be hopeless cases, irredeemable. All turned their backs on a life headed for sure death and destruction. None of these guys woke up one morning and decided, today is the day to leave La M. Something powerful and dramatic took place in their lives, something that rocked their foundation. Decades of criminal programming do not suddenly cease without a reason. Like Kilroy, Big D, Johnny Green Eyes, and other hardcore dudes, Conejo's personal road to Damascus led him straight into the arms of his creator. It still sends chills down my spine just to talk about it, because this is also what happened to me. After meeting Christ in 1976, I took a different path, but that's a different story. Like me, Conejo wasn't in trouble with any of his carnales, nor was he looking to work off a long prison sentence, nor was he about to be rattled by a wife or girlfriend threatening to leave him. No, sir, when Conejo got on his knees in his jail cell and surrendered himself to Jesus, this wasn't a B-rated Mickey Mouse jailhouse conversion. His decision to become a born-again Christian not only altered his life forever, but he is also being used to this day in the lives of many young men and women. In the Christian world, it is called building treasures in heaven. Conejo talks about being at a church fundraising car wash sometime back in the 1980s, when a vehicle rolled up on him with guys he believed were coming to take him out. Instead, after confirming he was serious about his commitment to God, their parting words was contained in two simple words: be real. In other words, you serve Satan very well, You serve La M very well, so be real in what you're doing and don't come back." Then they drove away. If you check out his book, Blood In, Blood Out, in chapter 18, titled Be For Real, you can find this on page 164. I pray that God will continue to bless Art Blajos, his family, and most of all, his ministry. Órale, conejo. Be real.